To Cosmoverse. This is a tiny desk style music incubation, residency, and performance series that elevates the work of Scarborough, East End, and out of core artists. This project supports BIPOC established and emerging musicians to elevate their work, help them experiment with creating new work, and explore collaborative processes, build community, and build their professional portfolios through professional documentation of their work and process. During each artist's designated residency month, space is reserved at the Greenhouse Theater space for research, rehearsal, and creation time over 2 to 3 days per week. During this time, they engage in a period of creation and preparation for a professionally filmed musical set and podcast-style interview at the Greenhouse Theater. At the end of this residency, we are now hosting this podcast-style artist talk, which serves as a way to invite audiences into a more holistic and human-centered spectrum of the artist's creative process before and beyond the performer that we see under the lights. I'm very honored to be sitting down with Harish Mohan Katala, who is a devotee of Shiva, expressing this sacred connection through the blessings of sequencing words, arranging melodies, and channeling the vibration of voice. His work embodies philosophical musings on the nature of spirit, heavily inspired by the mystical traditions of Hinduism, potently condensed and offered in the forms of poetry, music, and instrumentation. Mythology is a common theme in his work, merging the ancient traditions with a contemporary creative twist. Born and brought up in Kerala, he proudly includes South Indian influences in his art, inspired by the rich tapestry of personal experiences that organically flourishes in his personal style of creativity. He is also an avid listener of Indian classical music, including elements and techniques from the genre in his own work. Harish has a fruitful history and attachment to performance art. He has been performing music live from the age of 15, participating in Battle of the Band competitions during his time in boarding school in Kottayam, Kerala. He has also regularly performed at open mics in Toronto from 2018, and you can find him frequently performing at open mics at Bampot Bohemian Tea House, Alternity, Rise Open Mics, and the OBJX Studio Open Mic Jam Sessions. He's also very passionate about storytelling and recently has performed at the Burdock Cafe for replay storytelling. You can find most of his work highlighted on Moksha_shot, sounds where words, sounds, and images bloom and unfold as a myriad of metaphorical lotuses, each representing creation in its divine light. Welcome, Harish. Thank you so much.
Well, that was quite a bio, huh?
Yes. Well, I love it because it really lets me know exactly who I'm sitting down with. But now we want to go, beyond the bio and even beyond the performance that we got to just witness and really find out why and how and who you really are. So thank you for giving us that head start. Now we're going to dive a little bit deeper, if that's all right.
Yeah, totally.
The first question that I have for you is I just would love to know more about your artistry and what really inspired the work that we saw today and that you've been creating throughout this residency with Cosmoverse.
I think art has always been extremely important to me as a person because it helps me express things without the constraint of being influenced by an outer perspective. It really helps me dive very deeply internally and find no limit in how much I'd like to explore within. And I think that every individual has such a rich tapestry of an internal world within them. And it is so easy to get distracted from it by things that are calling to us externally. So I'd say that's the root of where this music originates from. I never had the intention to create a particular uh, form of music or follow like a tradition, but it's something that came organically as an extension of exploring my own internal world, the universe within. And the way that it found expression was through the idea of religion and mythology, and even that, I think, happened in a more synchronous sort of fashion. It sort of appears to you when you don't even really realize that you have been seeking it. So the songs that I performed, yeah, they take a lot of heavy inspiration from some synchronistic internal exploration that is manifested in the form of the tradition of Sanatana Dharma. And I've had the privilege of being introduced to that tradition through my family, who's never really enforced it upon me, but it was always there as an option if I was naturally interested in it. And I think this is the time in my life where the pieces are sort of fitting in.
Mm-hmm. I love that. And, I love that you touched upon some of the ways that you were able to create this, like the creation stories, which a lot of that for you comes from religion. And I would love to know if there's any specific things that have informed your work being an artist from outside of the Toronto core. Let us know exactly where you're from in the city and how that's influenced your work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd definitely say it's a very interesting mix, because I feel like the foundation of who I am developed at this point in my life where I was in Kerala, but I wasn't actually born in Kerala. I was born in Saudi Arabia because my dad was working there. So the culture over there it is primarily Islamic in nature, but I was living around people who were also Indians who had come to Saudi Arabia. So it was like a mixed sort of culture in a way. But I feel like the foundation of who I am developed when I started high school in Kerala, where the people I was around were so academically, they didn't really care about things because their life was so rich without it. In the sense, their day-to-day life in the rural landscape of Kerala. And those influences started getting painted onto me as well. And I remember the most notable memory for me is always running around playing cricket or hide and seek or whatever without having any sort of footwear on. And I've mentioned that to people who live in the city, and they're like, oh, you're going to get stabbed by needles. Like, what are you even thinking about? But I think there is that the feeling of soft soil beneath the feet and a real comfort and connection to nature. So I think the foundation of who I am has heavily been influenced by that, which is also sort of seeped into the music in a very unconscious sort of way. Like there's a certain primal and primordial sort of freedom that is expressed through the music. And in terms of the influences here, definitely like the language I've definitely picked up, and it isn't particularly there in this form of music that I've presented today, but in my general style, I would say there are influences of slang and a particular way of saying things in a fun sort of way, which is not as serious as this. So there is that side too, but it's rather than something that I can directly point to, I think it's just the general foolhardiness that I've absorbed as a consequence of coming to the city, where I have the capacity and the freedom to be playfully reckless. Like I know there is a limit, but until that limit, you can still play. And there are so many artists in the city who share the similar sort of philosophy of that play through art. We're not really limited through it, but we learn to expand from it. So it's a mix of both of those worlds.
It's beautiful. I love that. And, it leads into the next question. of what you're creating right now, what do you hope your legacy will be from this work that you've created? Even, the foolhardiness as well as the seriousness. Like, what are the things that you hope to draw from this and put into your legacy?
I think my intention with making music is to offer a reminder as to who we truly are. And there's a moment with any form of art where you sort of forget yourself and open your mind up to the reality that is presented in a particular artistic format that comes as a derivation of an individual's deepest truth at that moment.
Mm-hmm.
So when you allow yourself to first access that and display it for other people to receive, it reminds other people of their own capacity to do the same. And it creates this whole interesting network that makes us realize that human beings are not only material beings, sensory beings, but we are deeply spiritual too.
Yes.
And it's so easy to forget that spiritual aspect, again, which goes to what we were talking about earlier. So I feel that my intention is to, through the music, is a remembrance of our true nature, of our spirituality, of the fact that there are many intangible things as well, not only the tangible. And beauty does not necessarily have to be so concrete. It can be so free-flowing, and it can also be something that is very nuanced. So, yeah, connection to the spiritual nature, to summarize, I think that's my intention.
Beautiful. Love that. And what do you think the importance of artists is at this time, especially with so much happening socially, ecologically? What do you believe is the role of artists?
I think it is to understand that the primary responsibility that we take on sort of unconsciously, there's no contract that we sign, but when we become an artist, is we are going to express difficult truths. We are going to be polarizing individuals, because there are going to be some people who are heavily moved and inspired by the things that you make, but there is definitely going to be another series or group of people who might not necessarily resonate or agree with what you say. But I think as an extension of connecting to your integrity as an individual, the art that you make becomes an sort of holds the energy and the aura of integrity as well. So I think the responsibility of an artist is to be completely true to themselves and refine and cultivate their own internal energy to such an extent that they're confident of the place that it comes from and what it manifests into externally. And the absorption of whatever they create becomes something that can be deeply moving and healing to the people who need it. So it's just about creating. I guess that's a simpler way to put it, where the responsibility of the artist is to create, and the responsibility of the audience would then be to interpret, because maybe there's something important that the artist is saying in a very subtle or nuanced way, or maybe in a very evident and straightforward, direct sort of way. It's all social commentary with a lot of beauty, every piece of art, because even the expression of an individual's internal life is some derivation of something absorbed externally too. There's like a deep dance between these two worlds. So yeah, I think the responsibility of the artist is to create, and to create authentically.
Beautiful. And for you, now just moving away a little bit from responsibility, more towards, you mentioned it earlier, that creating here has given you more ability to be a little bit more reckless with your art. And so we're curious to know, what risks are you looking to take with your art? Have you taken any risks in this residency, and what do you hope to do more of in the future?
Yeah. In terms of risk taking, I come from a very traditional sort of background in terms of my family. Like, even something as faint as, I mean, it's not actually faint, but smoking cigarettes or consuming alcohol, it's not given as much of a liberal minded view. It has like strict consequences if you do that. But this sort of ties into the music and the storytelling stuff as well, where I've been experimenting with talking about these things in public. And my mom follows me on Instagram. She knows everything that I'm doing, like in terms of artistically. So it's been a very funny journey to show that adult, unrepressed side of myself to her, like which is away from the traditional in a way. But in terms of the music and in terms of the residency, I think technically in terms of guitar playing and also vocal techniques, I've taken a lot of risks. What I'm comfortable with is actually a much more jazzier, slower, sensual sort of style. But I've experimented with focusing on the vocals more and really channeling that energy without the judgment of how it's going to be perceived. And there's even like some riffs inspired by rock music and metal music that came about spontaneously, which I am not very familiar with, to be honest. But I think the space really allowed me to surrender, as there was no one who was witnessing me during this process of creation. Like there was so much freedom, and there wasn't a roommate who'd be like, hey, can you turn it down, or like something like that. So I was really able to dive in and let my mind and soul wander wherever it wanted to without any limitation. And that can be risky because we might stumble into things that are very uncomfortable within ourselves. And I also feel like art is naturally therapeutic in the way where it helps you understand those blocks and alchemize them into something even more beautiful. So yeah, in terms of risk taking, just being more vocal and being authentic and letting people know what's going inside. So yeah.
That is absolutely beautiful. And it really runs into my next question and final question, which is, how has this residency with Cosmoverse impacted you as an artist? You touched on some of it, but if you want to go into a little bit more detail about how it's impacted you presently and how you feel that it will impact your broader legacy.
As the first time that I stepped into the space, there was this moment of recognition. That's the only way I can really phrase it, where something just snapped in my head, which is like, this is what you've been missing. And I've always been the sort of person to power through the creative process despite the distractions, because I thought that was some indicator of my resilience as an individual, which it is, but it is not always necessary to suffer in order to create something good. It is not necessary to suffer in order to create art. You can, but you don't have to. There are other ways too. Focus allows you to create great things. Love allows you to create great things. Peace allows you to create so much. So that is something that I realized when I had a space that was energetically imbued with the intention of creation. And the separation from the outside world, in a way, whenever I've stepped into that space, everything that is outside of that space just turns off. It's like, sometimes I feel like if I open the door and look out, it's just going to be like whiteness everywhere. Like there's no world outside of it. It's so secluded in a peaceful and creatively inspiring way. And how has this helped me, and what I feel it does for my artistic direction in general, is that it makes me want to dedicate more time to being completely alone and being conscious of the spaces that I choose to create in. And to not be afraid of the intensity of the creative process too. Because when you're alone and you're creating and you are a witness to your thoughts completely in a space that is silent, it can be very intimidating if you're not comfortable sitting with yourself. So yeah, it's taught me a lot. I could actually go on for a long time about the importance of a creative space, but mainly it is that respect the creative process as well. devote some time to it, and it's going to be difficult initially. You might not see results, but you really have to trust the process.
Yeah. It's beautiful advice. That was a huge gem, and what a wonderful way to end off our interview together. Thank you so much, Harish, for your contribution to the Cosmoverse, and looking forward to seeing all that you have created.
Yeah, this was delightful. Thank you so much, Al.
You're welcome.
Ha ha ha. Ha ha ha. Ha ha ha. Ha ha ha. Ha ha ha.
Yeah, that felt good. That's good.
Whoa.
Awesome. Awesome. That was really fun. Yeah, that felt so like good. Like earth. Yeah, just like rooted. Oh, yeah. That was good.
That was so good.
That was good.
That was good.
Yeah, yeah.
Great.